Welcome to episode 303 of CppCast, the first podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Rob Irving, joined by my co-host, Jason Turner. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm all right, Rob. I learned from the Twitter comments that I can't just say that we're still the only C++ podcast just because other podcasts don't necessarily release on a regular schedule.
That's true. We try our best to be regular, but we can't hold everyone up to that standard. We can't impose that on them. Yeah. The more the better, though.
Yeah. And just to give a shout out to the No Diagnostic Required podcast, NDR, which do release a bit more regularly than the others, and I had forgotten about them, so just comment on them again. That was Phil Nash and Anastasia
Kazakova,
from JetBrains.
Yeah. Okay, well, at the top of their episode, I'd like to read a piece of feedback. I'm going to cheat a little bit this week, and instead of reading some feedback, I'm going to highlight this tweet that I put out, which is that we're always looking for new guest suggestions. Please reach out if you're interested in coming on the show. And I just tweeted this earlier today, and I already got a couple suggestions, which is good.
And you're using a Bernie meme here?
Yeah, I'm using the Bernie meme. CppCast listeners, I'm once again asking for your guest suggestions. It's a good one. I got a couple suggestions. Tim Sweeney from Epic. That'd certainly be great. I don't know if he's going to be difficult to get a hold of, though.
Isn't he one of the anti-C++ developers, or am I thinking of someone else?
I'm not sure, but I know Unreal Engine is certainly developed in C++. So.
That's true. Maybe I'm thinking of someone else. You can just ignore my comment. I'm sure we'll get feedback about it.
Right. But yeah, a couple other ones. Someone suggested we have Hartmut Kaiser on again.
We haven't had Hartmut on.
We had him
6 years, yeah.
Yeah. Talked to the developer of ENTT framework.
I think we've mentioned news items, yeah.
Yeah, and also author of Dear I Am GUI, and that's another one we've mentioned a couple times. It'd be good to have him on.
Yeah. That could be interesting. I wonder, Omar? I think that's who that is. I wonder how busy he is. No
idea. But yeah, keep the suggestions coming. We will try to reach out to as many of these people as we can and have some more new guests on the show. Or old guests. We always like having guests on as well, like Hartmut. Okay. So we'd love to hear your thoughts about the show. You can just always reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at feedback@cppcast.com. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes or subscribe on YouTube. Joining us today is Darrell Wright. Darrell has been growing as a programmer for over 20 years in a variety of environments. He started programming C++ with Borland C++ in the 90s as a child and has been enjoying it ever since. When not at work, he enjoys running and the outdoors. He has worked on JSON Link in its current design for over 3 years, but developed other JSON libraries prior that lead how he approached it. Darrell, welcome to the show.
Hi there.
So you mentioned that you grew up with Borland C++. We've talked about Borland a little bit lately and had some of their developers on. Just out of curiosity, have you played with any of the new generation of their tools?
I haven't used it probably since university when I got introduced to GCC and kind of from there. Back when we got for loops that had scope.
Right. Just out of curiosity, just when did you enter university, if you don't mind my asking?
Before the .com boom, so late 90s, or mid to late 90s.
Okay. Yeah. It's my university made Visual Studio as our quote required compiler, but it didn't actually matter because we were also required to have FreeBSD installs, which I don't know, in retrospect, it feels all kind of backward. I had FreeBSD installed for like a week, and then I installed Linux and just used that from then on.
I remember first year we used Pascal on, it was probably DEC Unix, but there was a lot of Solaris too. Like at one point I was admitting one of the Solaris servers. I remember getting to replace the CPUs on I think I had 16 of them, and it was like an E4500 or something like that. It was kind of cool at the time. Like the CS department had their own.
Their own what? Sorry.
their own Solaris server.
Oh, okay.
Or Sun server, yeah.
Interesting.
And yeah, then we had we would try to get, because I don't think nobody wanted to use the Sun or the deck tooling. We wanted the GNU stuff because it was newer.
Mm-hmm.
And generally worked better. And then, I think I can't remember when it was in the 98, but yeah. And we were passing around copies of the standard in the computer lab because it was bringing out a lot of the new, it was much better than what we were used to.
Awesome.
The standard library was there.
I said it feels like we're still fighting for upgraded tools. Like no matter what the environment is, come on, why can't we get a better compiler on here or whatever?
Well, I've been happy with at least C++ 17 lately. I haven't had the ice. I'd be playing vanilla ice once a week around GCC 9 era, and Clang around the same time, a little less, and MSVC. It was you just couldn't push them into the const expert stuff too much. It just, and then I'd fuzz it, kind of trying to make it work. I'll try expressing it a different way, and it was and then it was the wrong way, but it worked at that time.
Okay, well, Darrell, we got a couple news articles to discuss. Feel free to comment on any of these, and we'll start talking more about your JSON library.
Okay.
All right, so this first one we have is a GitHub library, and it's called FTX UI, which stands for Functional Terminal User Interface. And this one looks pretty neat. C++ library for terminal-based user interface. It looks like it has controls for making some graphical components within the console pretty easily. Looked pretty nice. Jason, have you dig into this one at all?
I haven't, but it's been on my radar for like at least 2 years, and I keep meaning to play with it, but I just haven't gotten to it yet. Now I wonder if I should with my current project I'm working on.
Is there another one like this? Because I keep remembering something like this where you design the GUI with ASCII, or is that another one?
That might be a different one. This one is a little bit more like functional programming style and less.
Okay, yeah. The GUI, and it looked amazing.
They have one of these really nice demo GIF videos showing off some of the features of it, and just like a demo user interface, which looks really nice.
I tried the Inscription or the WebASM stuff, but it wouldn't work in Safari or my browser.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. I like WebASM. Well,
speaking of WebAssembly, the next article we have is from Ben Smith's blog, and we've had him on a couple months ago talking about WebAssembly. But this post is PokeGB, a Game Boy emulator that only plays Pokemon Blue. And the entire thing is like 68 lines of code. It's pretty impressive. It's an extremely long post where he goes in depth about like the Game Boy architecture and how this emulator was written, which I think is something he's done before. He's written like a more full-fledged emulator, but this was just a really small one made just to run the Pokemon game, right?
I hope they can shrink it to get into the obfuscated C or contest. Like they mentioned that it was just over on the site.
Yeah, the obfuscated code that he first showed looks like Pokeballs, but that was after running it through some type of obfuscation tool, and the actual code he wrote is a little bit more easy to read, but still pretty small.
It's awesome. I don't have much else to say other than it's awesome. Oh, there's actually a couple of blank comments in here. I didn't notice that, just to make the shapes be what he wanted them to be.
It's like C++ art.
Yeah. It's okay, so what stands out as awesome, just for the record, is my cousin and I had been toying with the idea of doing like a hackathon where we challenge each other to make a Game Boy emulator, like Rust C++ kind of thing. And I don't want people to get too excited about that if they thought it would be fun. But part of the problem is that finding like all of the information that you would need to do that in one place is surprisingly hard. Like NES emulation docs are like really well organized in PC and Commodore and stuff, but for some reason the Game Boy docs, I mean, they're all there, but getting them like in one place, these are the things you need to know. This is like a perfect primer on all the things that you need to know about the CPU architecture, the PPU architecture, and timing and opcodes and all this stuff.
Yeah, the memory map and everything there too, and what he used out of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm looking at this code and I'm thinking, this is so simple. I think I could run this through my Commodore 64 tool and make a Game Boy emulator for the Commodore 64. But then my hopes were just dashed when I read that this Pokemon cartridge is a ridiculous 1 megabyte. Like, who has that much storage that they could?
Could you pretend it's on one of the add-on? Oh, we can't address it unless you pay. Maybe if you couldn't, you need like multi-level paging.
Yeah, it would be weird. I'd have to have some sort of paging. I'd have to use an MEU, one of the memory expansion units, and then I'd have to have some sort of paging architecture, and I might be able to get it to work, but it would be crazy slow, I'm sure, but it'd be fun.
Okay. And then the next thing we have here is an article, Tuka's vision for the future of regression testing. Just, you want to tell us a little bit more about this one? There's an announcement of a new testing software.
Yeah, I'm still I've read the article a couple of times now and still kind of wrapping my mind around exactly how it works. And hopefully we'll actually get the opportunity to speak to one of the developers about this project. But it's an automated regression test generating suite. And one of the projects I work on, we have every time master is rebuilt, I guess, on GitHub, we save the results of those of all the tests, in a what's the word I'm looking for? What's the style of testing that Claire McRae talks about?
Acceptance testing?
Yeah, like acceptance test, basically. Yeah. So we say, okay, this is the baseline requirement, and we save that as basically regression test. Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that for how we do this. Then whenever you push to develop, it reruns all those regression tests, so you know if you broke anything at all in any way, any output file. So we have it's like acceptance testing, but with a moving target. And I'm hoping, from what I understand from reading this blog, this article, that this would give you the same thing in an automated way, because you can click any two different versions and see what differed in their output or in their regression test generation. It looks pretty cool.
That sounds really powerful.
Even visualizing differences. I was looking into, I have a big JSON file of benchmarks for the library I wrote, and tooling to visualize performance differences, and with each Git revision, it's hard to find, or you're writing it yourself.
Oh, that is an interesting idea. And again, hopefully we'll get the opportunity to actually talk more to the developers about this. But yeah, I could see that for performance regression comparisons, but also if it could handle things like output from Bloaty. And then you could look at actual binary diff comparisons, or from one of the ABI diff tools, and you could see, did I change the ABI between these versions, and how? I mean, ABI diff is a GNU tool, I think, so it's available on most Linuxes.
That sounds really cool. I think I'd be incrementing major version every time.
Probably. I think most of us would be.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to mention is last week we mentioned the Course CPP conference, which was announced. They wanted to share with us an announcement that their first keynote speaker is going to be Bjarne Stroustrup. It's going to be a live remote talk followed by a Q&A session. So that's really exciting. Great to have Bjarne involved in this conference. And again, early bird tickets are on sale, I think, until June 30th. And also still have the call for speakers open.
The biggest C++ event in the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, also the only C++ event in the Mediterranean that I'm aware of, but
quite possibly, yeah. Okay, so Darrell, can you start off by telling us a little bit about your own JSON library?
So it's different than most of the other C++ ones in that what you're doing is you're mapping directly to your data structures or even other people's. The main requirement is you need to be able to construct something and extract the data out. So you use a declarative mapping where you and it's using templates and it was really inspired by Hannah's approach there with regex. And I remember when she was developing that, as and talking about how it eliminated the branching in the resulting code because you don't have to make those choices anymore. So now I know I needed a number parser. Actually, it's down to unsigned, signed, floating point, because I know what data type I'm going to parse into, and then I can give an error because it's never going to fit and at that point. And so with that, and in the past, I tried using intrusive macros, and before that was the JSON DOM object, and I could never make them fast. In this way, I don't have one location in the library except if you count the string output, if you output to a string and not an output iterator, and that allows for the context spur because it's dependent on your data types being context spur at that point. So if you imagine it, it's like taking your constructor, you're calling your constructor for your resulting type, and each argument to it is a parser. And then in recurse, up the stack, the result, those ones would have, if they were an object and not a value, like string or something, they would have, the little parsers feeding its constructor. And then, so it's just one big upside down tree, or I guess it's a right side up tree but
upside down from the computer science perspective, right side up from the biological perspective.
Although the root is the root's at the bottom, so it's a right side up tree.
Okay.
Of constructor calls coming down into your one value, and so most of the code's pretty simple. You have a number parser. It only cares about parsing a number, or it's a floating point one. That's probably the most complicated, unsigned, and then strings, but then you can now start exploiting things in the type system. Okay, so I know, and if you want to go a little bit out of spec, you can say I have a raw string. I'm just going to go to the next quote, and just mem copy it, be done. Or I know the data will never ever have escapes in it. But it also you can get better errors or cheat if you want and get better performance that way. But even with checked, because you don't have a lot of the branching, it's, for some of the benchmarks, it's hitting well over a gigabyte per second.
Oh, wow.
So I just want to make sure I understood you here. You're saying it doesn't have like a DOM kind of capability at all. You must give it a data structure to read into.
There's a delayed parsing type where it'll give you a lazy parsing DOM where it doesn't actually it just skips it. So it'll do the rudimentary JSON structure checks as it's skipping through, because it's got to be able to get to the other side of that value.
Okay.
But and you can now and there's some cases where you'd want to do that, like where I saw it, the users using it the other day. But where you do it's not a simple exploration of the data, and then you go and pass, and you can do the from JSON with an actual type after. But the library itself has helpers for things like variant take variant types, key values. Like you can map you'll quite often see key values in JSON as a string with a key and whatever object on the right, and you just map it right into a standard map. Or if you want to support the one that nobody supports with duplicate keys, you throw it into a multi-map, and it doesn't care.
Huh.
And then the only requirement there is, it's the container iterator pair constructors. But even then, if that doesn't work for you, there's a constructor object in each type if you want to go into the tweaks, and you just got to take those two iterators and do with whatever you want to give your type. But most of the time you're just going to say, and JSON in the previous version, there's a new one coming out once they get through all the documentation. You say like JSON number, the name of the member, and that could be it. Or you can say, specialize on integer or unsigned, whatever. Or you can, in the next version, you're just going to be able to say JSON link, name, and the type you're going to, and it'll probably know your type, because most things are either, they follow an arithmetic type, but via, especially if you include, now you pull, because it pulls in numeric limits to determine that, where you'll have types like boost big ints, or the multi precision. You can it'll see it's a number, and it'll actually, as long as it acts like a number, it'll work.
It acts like a number from a compile time perspective, has numeric limits, you're saying, and
then the operations, be like an integer,
okay,
or be like a floating point number. So as long as it fits the the concept of that type of value, it's gonna be able to parse to it.
So if I have like a static, I have a data structure of some sort that's like, I don't know, let's just say for argument's sake, a person object. It's got like a first name, a last name, an age, whatever. And yep. I've put in the correct decoration that you need here and pass it into your JSON parser. That can be all const expr, because it knows exactly what size thing it needs to push into, and it doesn't have to do any dynamic allocation or anything like that.
Yeah. Because all it's going to care about is you've said, okay, so it's got name, it's got age, say it's got I don't know, city. Okay, so string, we'll call it an integer, and string. So you would go like JSON member lists, and then within there you'd say JSON string with a name, and you put the name into C++20. You can just put the quote unquote name, but it's a C++17 library.
Okay.
So now, and I think with the newer GCCs, you can't use the old hack like I think Kano was using in CUTRE.
Right.
So you're just going to create a compile time string literal, a string literal that's const expr, and pass that. So in a lot of code, the only difference is whether the quotes are not there. So, the member name, the type, and with the type is already there. And then from that, you just go from JSON, give it the type in the in the alligator braces. Wow, I'm having a brain block here. And pass it to any string like range of characters.
Okay. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. Yeah. And even then, it's going to look at the type of string you pass it. If it's a standard string, or you tell it otherwise, it will, it'll exploit that zero termination, because now there's a lot of places it doesn't have to check first is less than last, because it knows, like, if you're doing a digit parse, it'll never be a digit when you hit to that null terminator. So it can just do the work it was doing, is, like a while it's a number type thing.
Okay.
And so like every time I see a place where you can optimize based on the type, trying to do that there, or the concept.
Okay.
But yeah, and and there's examples in the repo of const expr. There's a few const expr arrays where it's doing. I haven't actually tried the C++20 vector yet, because getting a compiler I can't remember which compiler supports it.
Only Visual Studio at this point.
Okay.
I just double checked that yesterday for reasons.
Someday soon.
Right.
Next year. But yeah, and like it's using C++ 17. I said, yeah, it'll take advantage of 20. Like there's some places where 20 brings in a couple features, like with the dynamic stuff where you can have context for constructor or destructors. So now you can do your scope exit as a context per type construct. And you can now get guaranteed copy elision even if you have to mutate something after you do the parse. So I'll parse a number, and afterwards I gotta move the cursor to the end of the value, or like the next value. I can do that in a scope on a scope success, and that allows you to support things like non-movable. It has come up where you have non-movable, non-copyable types because you have you have the guaranteed copy elision. And you can tell it to always do aggregate construction if you want. It'll just with aggregate you can just it's just all you can do types like that.
Interesting. So I just want to clarify, like if I pass in a like we were just talking about this person or whatever with a string like thing, but we don't have C++ 20 yet, and we do want context spur, I can just have like a character array or something that can hold the result, and then I get a compile time failure if the string in the JSON doesn't fit into the statically sized character array I gave you?
You would, because as soon as you leave the end of the array, the compiler is going to say you can't access that.
Right.
Yeah.
So you would get an actual compiler like address past end of
depending
object or whatever.
On which compiler. Yeah, right. And like if you make yourself, where I think anybody's doing a lot of context spurs probably had the standard array, and then you just throw a size in and operator, index operator, and all what it requires of your type for that would be unless you pass in a custom callable for the constructor. Is just two its string is I think a pointer and a size.
Right.
The containers are 2 pointers, so it's using the standard library concepts quite a bit.
Okay.
There, we don't have concepts per se, so it just expects that you follow those. Right.
So if we go outside of what it expects, then what do our errors end up looking like?
Sometimes they're pretty bad.
Okay. It's hard to get right. I'm not going to give you a hard time.
I try to catch things up front, and the static asserts or errors like a common error would be you didn't map the type. So the error would say missing data mapping.
Okay.
And like in the type name itself, because it's it's really hard to get errors out of or warnings out of context per code.
Yeah, for sure.
And I would love a static print.
Oh, yes.
Or a debugger, without calling GDB. What does somebody suggest? Use compile GCC with -G00 and run it through GDB.
Right. That would be, I can't even imagine how painful that would be. Oh my goodness.
I don't want to. Imagine the size of the compiler.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, so you mentioned a couple times link, and is link somehow different from your JSON parser? Is this whole thing called link? Am I missing something there?
Oh, JSON Link. I think that's the name. I don't know how I came up with the name.
Okay.
But you're linking C++ and JSON.
Okay.
It's really boring in that way. Boring names, but and all you have is a declarative mapping of what you're mapping to. Recently, I don't need as much info because most things I'm finding you're able to figure out what they are. And that's it was really I got through this the other day, and what's really nice is that's going to lend itself to when we get reflection or using one of the reflection libraries out there where you have the member name and you can now just pass, the member name and pass it the type of that member, and it'll build. You should be able to build the mapping from whatever reflection info you have. And I want to go down that. I just been that's on how long the lists get.
This is I just was thinking about the fact that we were discussing that Ben Smith has implemented several Game Boy emulators, and one of my toy things to do as a Mandelbrot generator. My cousin likes to do an NES emulator. When you're playing with new things, it sounded like from your bio that you've written several JSON parsers. Is that just like the thing that you do from time to time?
I've been doing this one. It just seemed to stick. In the past, I used to do the 3D rotating cube in each language. I had it in Quick Basic using trigonometric identities to do the rotations of the projection, but I think I got it. Yeah, there was a few languages back then, back when you can int 10 your way to graphics.
So what did prompt you to write this JSON library? Was it seeing Hannah's compile time regular expression library? That
I was wanting to do something like this for a bit, and she opened my eyes into what was possible. So it was pretty cool. But getting down the path, it was actually, I needed to get I'm diabetic and I have an insulin pump, and like Scott Henselman will talk about it, where I have all my data in the cloud and I'm pulling it down, but I had no processing it locally. All the tools were just too slow, so it was taking minutes and to do tasks. So I'm like, okay, well, I can write a parser, and that'll be a quick job. And a few years later, and then that even prompted another tool that I wrote that because there was no like JSON schema for it or anything like that at the time, so I had to figure out it was easier to take the JSON and to figure out the data structure. It was like multi-gigabyte array of objects, and just figure out what the data structure was, because reading some JavaScript and Node stuff it's hard to figure out what a data structure is supposed to look like in them, because it depends. TypeScript is much nicer. But yeah, so and there's a tool on there, and it'll generate the bindings for you if you have JSON. One of the things I have in the go is to use JSON schema to do that, and generate the C++ data structures. I can do that now, but it's it's fuzzy, but it still saves a lot of time. And but then once you have it in JSON schema, it's as an IDL, you can generate your C++ data structures and the bindings, and you're good to go. And reverse generate the schema from the bindings is on the list of things in the future.
So if I had something that, I mean, we're talking about like key value pairs and stuff before, and I haven't spent so much time parsing JSON data, but if I've got some portion of it where I'm like, okay, I have a tightly rigid structure here, and I know that these are all the C++ things I want to bind it to, but then for this next blob of things, I really just want like a string to, variant of float double string int whatever, some generic holder of things in some portion. Can that be accommodated as well?
I have an unparsed, a delayed, like a lazy parsed value, but there's no reason why you couldn't take that and put it into something. It's not an area where I've put a lot of effort into, because I always know I need to work with the data.
Okay.
You don't have to parse everything. You can, but the default is it only cares about what you map. The rest it'll just skip.
I see.
And there's flags to tell it not to do that, and it must be exact. Because I assume, like you're getting it from data provider. They change it. You don't know. At least you get the errors, the runtime errors at that point.
Right.
But yeah,
This is pretty cool.
you can, and you look at the issues that a lot of the people have with a lot of the JSON libraries. It's variance. It always comes back to tagged variance and variance, because so there's a few ways of doing that. Like like part of this is I went and kind of did not a formal, an informal survey of how people are structuring their JSON.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I have a cookbook section where I kind of try to document a bunch of it, but the biggest, it seemed the biggest trouble because people had was, so, often it'll be a type, and then some object below that or before that will be mapped, that's the tag. Sometimes the tag is within the object itself. You see that in C anyways with like sockets, but it handles those situations where where you're mostly, if it's a sub member, you give it the name and it'll parse the rest of it as that type of object.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I was looking at your GitHub for a moment. I saw that in addition to the DAW JSON Link library, you also have this JSON to CPP, which sounds like a pretty handy tool that you can just take a JSON structure and create C++ classes from it. Is that right?
Yeah, that was the tool I was talking about there. Yeah. And it's pretty close, but that's mostly what you need. It was a hack, but it works.
I know that in Visual Studio, like there's an option to do this kind of built in. I think it only supports the managed languages like C#. So I know it's handy to have. So it's nice to have it for C++ too.
I think I did that once, and then I just poured the C# or something over to C++.
Nice. Because
it was, it's not that far.
Yeah.
It's but yeah, so not too sure what's going to happen with C++ 20 in the future with this. Still waiting for compiler support. But I think the big one's going to be, the CNTPs, just getting string, making it that much cleaner. You don't have to sit there creating string literals.
Right. So working on this, you said for like 3 years, I'm guessing you have some real world users of this library now. Is that correct?
I know a few.
Mm-hmm.
You never know who's using things. And
sure. No, you don't.
Little hey, thanks, or little tidbits are always awesome. Like if somebody's using it. So I use it for me, like for my stuff, like whether just little, when I need to get info from web services or I want to subscribe, from C++, it just bring in libcurl and there you go. It's just one less. I don't like leaving the performance on the table.
Sure. Do you want to tell us more about the thing you did with the, getting diabetes info? Is that like part of a tool you used that makes use of this JSON library?
Yeah, I was using, there's some work. There's the Night Scout tool, and it lets you send all your your blood sugar readings from you can and your the insulin. If you have an insulin pump and a CGM will every 5 minutes it pulls your blood sugar, it checks your blood sugar, and so you get nice trending instead of a point using like every a few times a day. You now have 200 plus times a day. Okay. So you can make better decisions, and then you can use that, combine it with the other. So it's gigs and gigs of data, and people were doing bash scripts to process it. But they were doing amazing things, and being the cocky programmer, let's just do it in C++. And but there's something to be said about the high level. That's one of the things about C++. It's such a good language for making high level APIs, but nobody does. Like you can do all the pain, you can do all the pain in the library, and put and then you don't have those restrictions on the people using it as much, because what they're calling it with, and you can adapt your library around, this with generic programming and templates. So if they send you a string or a string view, well, with a string view, it's pain point, there's no zero terminator that
Right.
of. Well, yeah. But or like yeah. Surprised you haven't brought up ABI though.
Well, I was just browsing the source code. It looks like it's header only, right?
It is, yeah.
So you don't really care about the ABI, do you?
I don't. But I have lots of opinions.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, share your strong opinions about ABI if you would like to.
Sure. I think it should burn, but I think we should maintain string, vector, the arithmetic types, and layout. Nothing else. Like none of the.
Interesting.
And because with those you can build everything, and we see this like JSON, everything's being expressed with string, object, vector, array, and the arithmetic types. Throw in a nums and boolean in there too. Outside that, I just, and every time the compiler upgrades, it does change ABI. They fix bugs.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a constant small ABI breakages happening, it seems, but I guess most of the time it doesn't affect the average user.
Well, that's like the UB argument, isn't it?
Hey, I don't agree with it. I'm just
the UB doesn't affect it. It works on my machine.
Yeah, it works on my machine. Yeah, I don't know how many times. Well, less and less often these days. But oh my goodness, back in the early 2000s, how many people would say, "Oh, well, the stupid compiler's broken. If I compile in -03, then my project no longer works." No, that just means you have undefined behavior in your project.
And that's one place where const expert is amazing. It helps you not do the things that would cause that. And you now have static asserts instead of, so it breaks right away. And in C-line, I've seen you use it in a couple of videos. It's now telling me live that, hey, and why my static assert failed while I'm coding. Right. And it's awesome. I didn't even have to compile because Clang D is taking all my CPU.
that is true. My laptop can get a little hot when I'm programming sometimes.
Yeah. But yeah. Like I hope like everyone talks about how they want the library in C++ for JSON that maps directly to data structures, like Serday and Rust, or the inspiration I had was C#, and where they had you could just say expose an object to the web services. And this is probably 5 years ago, so it's probably out of date now, but it just blew my mind. Like I have a structure, I just opted in and said make it serializable, and all of a sudden I can use it as a web service. And I think that's where I'd like to see C++ go. Like one of the, if there's side project, one of the other things I'm half working on is taking Boost Beast and allowing you to, because we have the whole type system in, you can do a standard function like approach to providing a function, like a JSON RPC type thing or a web service. So it now knows how to serialize your invocable and the results. And so you give it a path, you give it a function. We still have to decorate it with, like we do with function. We can't just infer function traits because it's just finicky. But yeah, I think we just need to get these libraries that are higher level out there.
Yeah, one question I had on here that I wanted to ask you, which I'm increasingly getting here, is completely irrelevant, but I still want to go ahead and bring it up. Now, the question I was planning to ask you was, Do you use any like custom allocation strategies to get the kind of performance you have? Because that's what most other JSON parsers do. But it sounds like you never allocate anything, so...
But I went down this path. It was a 50% performance boost by using a custom allocator. So because so you have your strings, you have your vector. There's a locator protocol where either passes the last argument or the first with that type tag type.
Yeah. So
if you call the locator like from JSON a lock, I just kept it on a whole separate path at the top there just to make it easier. It will now check if you're constructible with either of those at compile time. And if you are, it'll pass it. So you're almost without PMR, you're getting like PMR type allocation because it's using the same allocator for every object that can use it. And so even because even though you're using the iterator interface to say vector, because the types above that are using the same allocator, you're still getting, and so I threw in a bump allocator, just it never deallocated, just kept going. I just gave it a big enough buffer that I wouldn't go past.
Right.
And I went from it was like 34, about 1 gig to 1.5 gigs in the test I was doing a second. It was amazing.
So like in the vectors and strings and maps and such that are contained in your custom types that I'm passing into your parser, I can
Those
also
were standard types.
Right.
Yeah.
But I have to pass in. You're saying what I'm trying to understand or make sure I understand is if I pass in an allocator along with the parse, then you just use it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Assuming the type is constructible with it.
Right. Yeah. So we still have to follow these allocator aware constructs and you detect them and use them.
Yeah, because we can check if it's invocable with that.
Right.
But that also means that your type, it wouldn't be standard vector anymore. It'd be standard vector T, whatever, my allocator.
Or you could use standard PMR and just pass in a PMR type. It should work the same way from your perspective.
I kind of wish we had that from the beginning and we just used that as the default.
Right.
It would have been, then you can just use the right allocator for the job, but your interface is always the same. If we're talking about ABI.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, I was quite amazed. Vector and string were mostly vector depending, but the maps and the sequence, the associated types, they don't, because they didn't seem to be as much of a benefit if I remember correctly. Maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I don't seem to remember getting as much out of them. Because vector will really optimize if you give it a random iterator.
Right.
And that's one of the places you could shut it off. But when constructing vectors in particular, I will say I'm a random iterator, but I only added the subtraction operator. Because then it'll do that distance check. I often know, because the way it's parsing, I have to skip values. Because I'm doing the constructor for this type right now, and I can't. I have to move the cursor to that part of the JSON file. I can't just parse it out of order from that. So what I'll do is I'll know where it is at that point. And for some things like arrays, strings, I'll count things like the number of elements or the first place where I have to go slow and I can't because there's an escape in the string, or if it doesn't have any, and then I can later on optimize on that because I now know the bounds, I know the number of elements. I can provide that subtraction operator, do the little lie. You can turn it off, but it works on 2 to 3 implementations consistently. And you go from, but vector, and this is where I want, if ranges to, or, I'm having a brain block on the rate. It's the ranges, it's the Sentinel iterator or the Sentinel type.
Right.
A vector needs that constructor so much because if a size Sentinel and it seems to come up where I don't have a random access iterator, but I have a size Sentinel. and it goes fast. I've built up iterators with where you just throw in like a function, a callable into them, like kind of like a map or transform, and it doing an FMA, you're getting all the vectorized instructions all of a sudden. And it doesn't have to sit there and because now you're also getting guaranteed copy lesion. It doesn't have any of the code for the deallocation, because it doesn't have to move out in the assembly when you look at it on, say, Compiler Explorer.
Okay.
And so there's that's probably the only place I kind of cheat like that, but it seems pretty safe because the only thing it can do is just not have the operations. It can't, do an operator +5 on those iterators or something like that, or an index. So it'll just fail to compile if it's not going to work. And
okay,
but yeah,
very nice.
So what compilers does this work on then?
So GCC, MSVC, in the CI, I have the 3 of those going. Clang, okay. Apple Clang also, but that's just 6-month-old GCC. Sorry, Clang, I mean.
Right.
But and I've tested lately as far back as GCC 10 and 9. Before I do the version 3, I'm going to test again. The website has the ones I tested when I released version 2. But it's starting to get to the point where, GCC 9, C++ 17 support. Well, they weren't even production ready for GCC 17 until I think it was GCC 11.
Mm-hmm.
And it's starting. There's a few things where, you if you throw it, they just start blowing. Like the older compilers will start using a lot of memory, whereas the new ones don't.
Right.
And if you don't have, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Finish, please.
I was just gonna say, if you don't have a computer with a lot of memory, and you're doing, but most things don't need a lot for the compile. It's when you get the 200 in some of the benchmarks, they have these classes where there's like 200 members or something like that, and it really stresses the templates because I had 14. I got it down to 10K, or a little under 10K, but I was like 14 or 15 kilobyte symbol names at one point.
Oh wow!
In those tests, so the compilers didn't like that. Normal stuff, it's actually smaller than what you'll get because there's only there's only a parser there for what the types that you're invoking and that.
So you mentioned that the library is currently version 2. What do you have planned in version 3? Anything worth sharing?
So version 3, it's going to have the more implicit mapping. So you just say, link this member to this type, like in a C++ type. You don't have to say JSON number, JSON string for most things. There's some type. You can say construct my thing as if it was a string, or like this other thing. There's aliasing in that way. So performance increases. The library is a lot cleaner in the last bit. There was a bunch. Those are the 2 that are recently that are come to mind. Everything that's worked before should work. Keep working. Like it's been mostly API stable. I broke it for version 3. That's right. I changed the way you do options because they're getting too long. That's how I reduced the symbol size. So I'm using just a single option as you put the options into a function if you want to go from the defaults instead of supplying an individual option. And CNTPV is going to be amazing for policy classes where, we were so wide on the templates before, and now we can have one and construct it like a normal class instead of having, a num here or a type here and a type here for different types of things. Just to make when you're putting your template options in.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that for policy template options. And I guess for our listeners, we should explain, you are saying class non-type template parameters.
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the non-type, like, we should just call them NTTP or non-type templates. And
Well, yeah, but those existed as values forever.
true.
So
I'm really excited about the, was it P1985 universal template parameters.
I don't
where
know
you
if I'm familiar with that one.
You can mix, you can have one that's it can be either a type or a value.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it may,
may,
and you do that template, and all of a sudden it doesn't work generically because you threw a standard array at it.
Right.
And it's got a number.
Right.
Yeah. So you'll be able to deal with stuff like that. Hopefully it comes. I'm hopeful for that one. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So for our listeners here, and if they want to do any of these things that we've talked about, context for parsing or custom allocators and all that stuff, are there examples on the website for how these things work?
There are. There's the test folder has a lot of, it's mostly just examples plus some stuff that's labeled details testing. And then there's a cookbook section on there where it's got some more high level. Plus the main README's got a bunch of stuff on how to approach, do a few simple things. But there's quite a few examples in the testing.
Okay.
And that's also how I test my documentation. I wish there was a way to link to it in the Markdown, but I take the example in the Markdown, throw it into a test, and they're all labeled cookbook, and then it's a fully working example.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, do you suggest that people go to develop and start straight from version 3 right now, or do you suggest they use your last release version 2?
Develop's gonna break. But I would say go with the release. The differences are pretty minor. And if you're using the defaults, you're not going to ever notice them. And most things you're going to use the defaults anyways. Like most people still parse their JSON to double. They may not, but you do see a lot. People want that UN64 but it even supports things like that was one of the things that came up in the data, because if you're getting your data from a web page, it sometimes quotes your numbers, and then sometimes it doesn't if you do math on it later on.
Oh,
so there's options for stuff like that. Is it a quoted number? Is it unquoted? Or maybe? And,
right.
And then there's one less branch there, or not. And it's going to use that to do less checking or more checking.
When do you think V3 library is going to be released officially?
When I finish the documenting the changes, so we're looking. I want to give myself a month or so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty close to being used how I want to use it. But there's I want good docs and lots of them, because.
From what I see on GitHub, you already have pretty good API documentation. Doxygen looks like it's pretty easy to read through. Yeah.
I wish there was something better than Doxygen.
Okay. Well, Darrell, it's been great having you on the show. Listeners should definitely go check out your GitHub page for DAW JSON Link. Anything else you want to plug before we let you go?
I just want to say thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk about C++.
Certainly. This was
having
fun.
you on.